Can you name the first important American composer who received all his formal training in the United States?
He has the German skill, but he has that American open, blue sky quality. It sort of floats up in a nice, buoyant way.
He was born 145 years ago this spring, 20 years after Brahms and 20 years before Rachmaninoff.
He loved his home. There are wonderful descriptions of him loving pear trees, berry bushes, box borders, and only the smell of the tanneries marred his recollections, he said, when he was growing up in Salem.
A Note to You with Virginia Eskin is made possible by the friends and alumni of Northeastern University. I'm John Emery. Virginia, who is our 100% homegrown product, and where in the 1870s could an American study music if not in Europe?
Arthur Foote, whose dates are 1853 to 1937, was born in Salem, would have gone to teachers at New England Conservatory as a young man, and then he was the first American to be granted a master's degree from Harvard, where he studied with John Knowles Paine.
Did this American education lead to American-sounding music?
In my estimation, it does, because I've made a study of Foote's chamber music and piano writing, and there's this, what I call spunky quality, which is full of that kind of American openness. He lays it all out right on his sleeve. The heart is right out there. There's no manic quality. It's just yours for the taking.
You've recorded the three pieces Opus 1 for cello and piano.
Yes.
Do these characteristics show up in as early a piece as that?
Yes, they do.
Let's listen to the third of the three pieces for cello and piano, Opus 1 by Arthur Foote.
All right.
Virginia Eskin piano, Jules Eskin cello, and that's the Allegro con fuoco, the third of three pieces for cello and piano, Opus 1, the earliest published work of Arthur Foote. He wrote that when he was about 28 years old.
The charm of Foote's music lies in that beautiful bel canto, melodic writing, and he even seemed to understand how to write for strings.
What do you mean by bel canto?
Well, you listen to that. It's a passionate, throbbing, endless. So Schumann does it a lot, where you have it's a propulsion of notes, and it's a very exciting thing to do in music when you have a beautiful melodic line, and then you have the accompaniment pushing you along. Of course, the danger is that the accompanist can push the soloist right off the stage. You were asking me about the American quality. To me, there's this sort of in-your-face triumph over the odds at the very end of that piece, you know, where it goes, that is so corny and great. No European would ever indulge themselves with that kind of, it's just incredibly sentimental. But an American is allowed, and I think it's very charming. It's just like American painting of that period. You know, it's painfully honest.
At the same time, you've spoken eloquently about the resemblance between Foote and Schumann.
Well, I've made a study of the second suite that Arthur Foote wrote, and listen to the incredible combinations. Foote has the same leaning. The melody goes. It's going up to the top to that high note, and Schumann did the same thing earlier. Do you hear that? It's like an arching. The key is the same. It's the same triplet. Or the difference for me as a pianist is that the Foote is slightly less complicated, but I don't think it's any less interesting. And in the second movement, in a very nice way, he pays homage to Schumann again. It's the same. He goes to A flat major, and the melody is. And here's Schumann. And again, Foote risks sounding corny, but it's very beautiful. And I feel as a pianist that if I can sell an audience some Foote and get my heart behind it, it's much harder than sitting down and just playing Robert Schumann. So I guess you have to have a bigger curiosity when it comes to listening and to sharing music on programs.
Let's listen to two pieces side by side.
Okay.
The first is the first of the Fantasiestücke of Schumann, and the second is the first of the second suite by Arthur Foote. about 40 years separated the composition of those two pieces. We just heard the first movement of the second suite by Arthur Foote. That was written in 1894, and it was played by Virginia Eskin. And before that, we heard the first of the three Fantasiestücke, Opus 111, written about 1851 by Robert Schumann. And on a note to you, I think that we hear the resemblance, or at least the homage that Foote holds for Robert Schumann.
It's a pleasure to discover music that is not well known, and it is a challenge to play. And I was thinking, the other problem, pianistically, John, is that when you're given music by Foote or Dvorak or Beach or even contemporary music, you tend to not make the peaks and the valleys. And I don't know why that is, but certainly pianists are guilty of it. When they see pianissimo, they don't really play a pianissimo. And there's an incredible drama that you rob from the music if you start something like the Foote mezzo forte. It's not as scary, and you have to creep under the skin.
Here's Arthur Foote in the latter half of the 19th century, living in Boston. No strong institutional affiliation. He later taught at New England Conservatory.
Right.
How did a composer, how did a musician at that time make a living?
He taught a lot of lessons. Privately at his home, and he loved his home. There are wonderful descriptions of him loving pear trees, berry bushes, box borders, and only the smell of the tanneries marred his recollections, he said, when he was growing up in Salem. And the first thing he does when he gets his darling daughter is gives her some baby pear trees, and her recollections are of him always with students. He had a direct connection to the Kneisel Quartet, and he's a very good friend of Isabella Gardner. When the daughter gets married, there's correspondence indicating a very, very nice wedding gift to the daughter. And so he's in the swim here in Boston. He's got good connections.
Foote was one of the co-founders of the American Guild of Organists. Did he have a church job?
Yes, in 1876, he made his piano recital debut in Boston, and then he was appointed organist at the Church of the Disciples. And 2 years later, he moved to the First Unitarian Church, where he stayed until 1910.
Well, his church job is, I guess, another answer to the question, how does a musician in the 19th century make a living?
Yes.
And I know he wrote some music for the instrument, and probably this is a good chance to listen to one.
Let's do it.
It's a suite listed as Opus 71. Here's the first piece, a Cantilena. It's arranged actually for violin and organ in this recording, played by Robert Murray and Ardith Lois. On A Note to You with Virginia Eskin, what we heard was Arthur Foote's Cantilena, the first of 7 pieces for organ, opus 71. I noticed that Arthur Foote wrote 100 or more songs. Were these salon songs that he wrote?
I think some of them were, John, but for the most part, you have to remember that Boston didn't have a big salon culture. It's still a city of churches, very religious and high-minded. Simple living and high thinking are the order of the day. And there's evidence of a huge amount of home music being made because, of course, Boston was the center of piano manufacture. And the bow window that we think of in Boston homes, the bay window, was to accommodate a piano. Everybody played.
Let's listen to one of Arthur Foote's 100 songs. And as we're listening to it, let's see how much of the parlor we hear and how much of the art song we hear.
All right.
It's called The Hawthorne Wins the Damask Rose. Jerome Barry sang that. He was accompanied by Alan Mandel. And Virginia, parlor or recital hall?
I'd say parlor. Fancy big Back Bay, Commonwealth Avenue parlor.
Music by Arthur Foote on A Note to You, and we'll hear some very good chamber music along with Foote's best-known orchestral pieces after station identification. A Note to You with Virginia Eskin is made possible by the friends and alumni of Northeastern University in Boston.